When Martin Luther presented his 95 Theses to reform the Catholic Church, kicking off the Reformation, which kicked off 500 years of theological schisms, heresies, and controversies, of which both the Unitarian and the Universalist religious tradition are heirs, one of his gripes was with the veneration of the saints. He felt that it was idolatry and pagan to pray to the saints when you were supposed to pray directly to God. No through line, no bypassing. So he, I think, might be surprised to see 500 years later, even atheists burying statues of St. Joseph upside down in their lawns to sell the house. How many of you have done it? Come on, right? And those he would consider heretics like the Unitarians or Universalists, visiting Catholic shrines of Our Lady of Guadalupe and reverently lighting a candle and asking Our Lady for blessings and protection. Because why not? That's what she's there for. The saints offered themselves to anyone for the fullness of the human struggle. That's what it is to be a saint. Martin Luther couldn't control that offer, and he couldn't control the taking up of that offer. He couldn't keep anyone who wants to be in that mystical relationship from being in that relationship. Sorry, Marty. Saints are those who live, breathe, and die in this service of salvation as they understand it through their particular context and their particular character. What they have in common is to have spent themselves as advocates for their vision of the most shining version of humanity. Like bodhisattvas in Buddhist traditions, saints are generous souls who consented to be entirely selflessly devoted to their purpose, even sometimes to the point of personal annihilation. When I was a little girl and I would read about the saints, I was really interested in them because they had these horrible, gory stories of martyrdom. I'm sorry to admit that, but it's true. Eventually, I began to be interested in them because I understood that the point of them, their lives wasn't suffering, but it was the ultimacy of their love and devotion. I also began to appreciate how many of the saints were real basket cases. And that gave me even more to appreciate and admire about them. Some saints are remembered as saints in hindsight, whose fate, and usually a tragic one, strikes a chord with those who learn their stories and who decide as a posthumous honor to say, that was a saint. We decide this. We name them that. The official church designation has nothing to do with it. I think you may know yourself some community saints or family saints. Now, the word saints in the Puritan church that launched Congregationalism and eventually the Unitarian church, that word was used for all the men who were full members of the church. But when we say church saints, that's not what we mean. We don't mean it in the 17th century definition. We are talking about the people who express love and devotion through kindness and service, who are weavers of the fabric of sacred time and covenant. I'm remembering some of those saints today. I'm remembering Bob Slater, for instance. And I'm so glad Tracy and Kelly are here. And I'm remembering a much more ornery saint, and I brought her picture with me this morning. If I called her a saint to her face, if I'd said, Jackie, you are a saint of the church, she would have screeched at me with her husky voice, and she would have blown smoke in my face and said, oh, Victoria, please! Because that's Jackie. But she was a saint of the church. She was difficult. She struggled with alcoholism, and she lost her sobriety and found it again and again. But she nevertheless daily held the church and its concerns in her thoughts and prayers every day. And she showed up every day to see what needed to get done, and she did it. She'd just check in. I'm going to do this. We'd go, thank you, Jackie. Sometimes she went a little off on her own. And we'd have to go, Jackie, what'd you do? But a saint. I keep her reading glasses in my study, which I guess you could think of as a kind of holy relic, and Martin Luther would not approve. But I don't pray to Jackie. I draw her near in prayer, as we do our saints. She offered of herself in her lifetime, and I know that was not an offer bounded by mortal existence. That's what it means to be a saint. You say, I'm willing, beyond my lifetime, to be of help, to be of use to you. Go for it. However it works, I hope it works. In my favorite spiritual memoir called Take This Bread, a staunchly atheist journalist, Sarah Miles, describes going into a church in her neighborhood in San Francisco. The church of St. Gregory of Nyssa. It's an Episcopal church. She was just curious to go into the beautiful building, had no sense of clarity about why she was doing it. And she gets drawn into the worship service, feeling super awkward, but nevertheless, again, participating, and she takes communion, upon which she has a dramatic and emotionally powerful conversion experience. This direct experience of God throws her into a tailspin of identity crisis. One of her first concerns is, oh my God, what will my friends think? What will my parents think? And she is also elated for reasons she cannot understand. And it's funny to watch her analyze herself. She writes all about that process. I'll let you read about it yourself if you want to, which I think you should. It's wonderful. Again, Take This Bread. St. Gregory's is not an ordinary traditional church. Its founders, two priests, wanted to bring the church back to its primitive Middle Eastern roots and kind of get away from the frozen chosen kind of worship. So they incorporated movement into the liturgy. Everyone dances in an old hand-to-hand kind of dance like this, very simple, to the communion table, for instance. And the preaching happens kind of in the round. You can see that right there. The preacher sits in a chair right up there and speaks from nothing but their heart. No notes, nothing. That's the rule. And everybody sits lined up on either side like these chairs, and the congregation speaks to what was preached as they feel called to do. There are drums and chanting and Tibetan bells, but there is no choir and there is no organ. Everyone is the choir. The building is wooden and has a huge rotunda with a Neo-Byzantine mural of saints. The congregation of St. Gregory's has identified these people as saints. Now, in her book, Sarah doesn't talk a lot about the mural of saints, but when I visited St. Gregory's myself, that was what captivated me, and I want to share some of those images with you of the rotunda. You see, Jesus is the Lord of the dance, and everybody and all of the saints are in a dance. Also notice that Jesus is not white. There they are dancing. And I'll tell you what really got to me. They're not all Christian saints. They're not all white. They're not even all human. There are some animals. They're from all over the world. They're all ages. They represent a wide swath of economic classes. There's Cesar Chavez, the labor activist. They're not safe people. There's Charles Darwin. That really struck me. Many of these saints are controversial and disturbing presences they were in their lifetime, stirring up protest and getting into trouble. They did risky and even inflammatory things to move the arc of the universe toward justice and liberation. They practiced revolutionary love. There's little Anne Frank. The icons show them in positions of beatitude, and I'm talking about the traditional images of the saint, but we have to remember that these people in their lifetime were fighters and survivors. They may have been weird and divisive, Malcolm X. And that's how many of them wound up martyred. This is so important for us to remember as the church of today. Those who will be remembered as having made the greatest contribution to the liberation of the human race and the earth will not be remembered for their sweetness, but for their fire. This little boy was a Pakistani child slave, Iqbal Masih. He was a rug, he was a bonded servant, slave, and he made rugs. He and other children were forced into this labor, and he got free. He escaped and spoke out to other children who were in that predicament and raised awareness of these children who were going blind and being crippled in the work of making these rugs, this painstaking work they did in the dark, and they worked obviously unholy hours and without proper nutrition and fresh air. And he was killed. He was silenced. And he lives on the rotunda. And now you know his story. Who would you include? Who would you include up there? If we said, you know, we're going to paint a mural of saints. Fun to think about. I was very touched as I stood and looked at these people to see singers, artists. You saw Ella Fitzgerald up there, poets on the rotunda, even Emily Dickinson, and I couldn't find her picture. But Emily, who kept only to her house and even went and didn't go anywhere, but her mind went deep, and she offered herself on the pyre of creative genius to the minds of us, her readers, who found in her words a holy communion, a sense perhaps of being less alone and forsaken in the world because Emily interpreted it for us. That's how I feel about her. There's an Emily Dickinson poem that has helped me immeasurably in dealing with seasonal melancholia, and I read it as a teenager and memorized it immediately as though it was a kind of literary medicine that my soul needed. Dr. Emily, Saint Emily. So, you could end up there. And that depends not so much on your perfect disposition, as it turns out, but as on our willingness to offer ourselves to the liberation of humanity using the gifts that we specifically have, where we specifically are, using our strange, weird combination of elemental energy and ability that we offer as sparks to keep the flame of human moral and spiritual life burning brightly. Maybe you wonder what happened to Sarah Miles. Well, she became a lay minister of St. Gregory. She caused some holy mischief by starting a food pantry there. Because her epiphany that day was so rooted in the communion bread of the act of being fed, she said that Jesus lodged in her like a crumb, in a way that she understood would outlive her own flesh. And so she started a food pantry at St. Gregory's. Look at what disruption that is. Do you think everybody was psyched about that happening in their sanctuary? So, as happens with any institutional change based on mission, it was a hard go. And she and her team that she recruited over years have been feeding thousands and thousands of people for 17 years. They have created community. They have blurred the lines between givers and receivers of what we call charity, very intentionally putting everyone together as equals in the distribution of food and the sitting at the table together. So there, you can't tell the difference between who's volunteering and who's receiving. Sarah has become a friend of mine, and I wrote to her a couple days ago to say, "You're becoming my sermon. I don't know why." And she wrote back and she said, "Hey, oh my God, we have to talk soon. I'm working for the PICO network now," which Echo is a local affiliate of. And she said, "Yes, tell them the food pantry's 17 years old." Sarah is not trying to be a saint. She's just trying to grow into harmony with the divine like the rest of us, putting her life force toward the work that feels necessary and right, and like work that she can do where she is. I'm just saying, it could be you, it could be me. What I have never understood until I saw the saints of St. Gregory's is that it isn't the saint themselves who decide, I'm a saint. It is those to whom and for whom this person pours out their lives, gives themselves as a torch to light the way and illuminate the way, who decide, that's a saint. For all the saints, we give our thanks. Past and present and future. Amen.